Hey guys, Ben Paynes here, and we are back with a different kind of video this time. Here we will have a video split into two separate sections. Here you are currently seeing footage that was meant to be a completely separate video. This is my first Elite Members Session event, and it was a GP1 event. However, my camera decided that it wasn't going to film any footage apart from this very first session, which was my qualifying session. So the way that this was set out is there was a practice session to begin, just to warm up. That was 5 minutes, and it was then followed by 3 F1 style qualifying sessions, and that was, the first one was 10 minutes, the next one was 8, and the third one was 6. Following on from this, there were 2 heated races, and they were, the positions for the grid were obviously determined by the qualifying session, the 3 average lap times from the 3 separate qualifying sessions. And then following on from this, whether you finished in that first race was then the qualifying positions for the second race. Now, I will go through some of my times and just sort of talk through it as the footage is rolling. As I've said, I'm really upset that my camera didn't actually record any footage from this, since this was my first event, and as you'll see from the times I got, I really did do reasonably well in my opinion. So in the first practice session I didn't really know what to expect, as I had some pretty quick times in social sessions, but putting into a race perspective was a whole different kettle of fish, and it was something that I was a little bit nervous about. That sort of led to my first practice session having me finish in 9th place, and this was a 38.669 is my fastest lap, which obviously isn't a very fast lap, but for a warm-up I wasn't too upset with this, as I was still ahead of 9 other drivers. There was 18 of us on track. We then went into the first qualifying session of the evening, and this is what you are currently watching now, and I ended up finishing in 12th position in this one with a 38.114 as my fastest lap, and that's with 13 laps being completed. After this I began to get a little more into my groove, as I finished in 8th position with a 37.599, which really did start to bring my average down in comparison to just languishing sort of in the lower half of the field. And finally, my third session in qualifying, I really began to motor, and I finished in 5th place with a 37.488 with my fastest lap, with the fastest person getting a 37.179, which I wasn't too far off, and I really did feel that I could get down to around those sort of times in the race. Now, the 18 of us were split into 3 different weight categories. So we had lightweight, which is anyone up to 75 kilograms, people between 75 and 90 kilograms were middleweight, which is where I sat myself, as I am around 81 kilograms at the time of recording this video, and then heavyweight was anyone above 90 kilograms. And this led me to qualify with all my average times put together. I began the first race qualifying in 10th place. I was really happy with this result, as my goal coming into this evening was to try and get within the top 10 drivers, as I really did believe there's some potential there, but I wasn't quite sure how I'd do in a more competitive situation in regards to just time lapse, which is what I'm used to at the moment down the Bristol track. And you can see here in the first practice session I really was just leaking positions on that top fast corner, which led to a lot of people just diving down the inside, and my confidence was beginning to minimise at that point. But as I will go into it, my confidence did grow throughout the sessions. So onto the first race, as this is a bit of a story time to be fair. I managed to hold on to 10th position off the start of the grid, and this then led to me leaking one position on that top corner that we are about to go up to in the footage here. I leaked a position very early, as I wasn't really defending the inside, and that is one of the main overtaking points that I realised on the track from the other drivers, and I slipped down to P11. But moving on throughout the rest of the session, I began to really get into my groove, and my average times were just becoming lower and lower, and I was keeping up with the train of karts that was ahead of us. There was about 2, 3, 4 of us that were in the same pack that was being held up, that was behind the main pack at the front, and it was between about 8th to 11th position. We were sort of all sticking around the same sort of times, but one member sort of drove off to the side for some reason, I'm not entirely sure, and that sort of gave me one position, and then following on from this, I was able to later, one driver ahead of me that overtook me earlier managed to dive down the inside of another driver, and I managed to follow them through. So at the end of the first race, I managed to finish in P9, and my fastest lap of that session was actually a 36.888, which I believe was an absolute blistering time, and it was also one of the fastest laps. It was the top 4 fastest laps for the whole session out of everyone, all 18 drivers. So I was the 4th fastest driver on track for that race, which I was extremely happy with, and it did give me a lot more confidence going into the second race. Finally, on to the second and last session of the evening. I did start in 9th place, and I did do very well to just maintain that position. I then moved very quickly up into 8th position, overtaking the person that overtook me in the first race, and this made me really happy as I realised I was putting in some very consistent and fast lap times. I was then overtaken by Connor, who is the mechanic at the track, and I decided to try and follow him through and attack the driver in 7th position, as I was in 8th at this point. However, as he went through on the bottom hairpin, which we've just gone round in the footage, the driver that he overtook slammed the brakes on, causing him to go sideways, and instead of just absolutely T-boning the driver that spun, I decided to jam the brakes on myself, and it resulted in me going into the wall, and I was stuck, and that was sort of race over from that point. So rather than finishing in a P7, a very high P7, which I would have been absolutely thrilled with to have done on my first race, I ended up finishing in P14, which was quite upsetting, quite disappointing, as I really was happy with how the race was going, and I felt really confident that my lap times were really good, especially for my first race, my first competitive race. And my fastest lap time was in fact a 36.694, which was a very quick lap time, and it was actually joint fastest with the person that finished in first place. And this is something I was extremely happy with. I was joint 5th fastest person on the track, and that makes me feel like I would definitely feel confident to come back and give it another shot in the future. But just obviously racing is racing, and accidents are a part of it, but I really was disappointed with how the race went, especially as I really was beginning to motor in the second half of the race, and I thought that a P7 was on the cards, and that would have put me in 3rd place in terms of the middleweights at the track in the sessions. Overall, I was incredibly happy with how the event went, and I knew that in the future if I came down again I really would give it another really good shot and a good go at the track and really attack more, as that's one thing I seem to just sit behind in the train and only really overtake on one corner, which I think the drivers ahead of me sort of sussed out and were able to defend quite easily. So definitely need to work on my overtaking a bit more, but once again I am really sorry that the video corrupted, or the video didn't even film, so as I really would have enjoyed making that video and seeing and showing you guys the lap times more than anything. It was just something I feel we could all like to see and view and learn from, but that's just how life goes sometimes. And I'd also just like to say a really big thank you before we move into the second half of the video, which is another part, but I'd like to say thank you to Harrison Earl, who really, he's another driver with his own YouTube channel, which I will link down below, but he really did make me feel welcome and helped me out a lot and here you can see on the left, just learning to overtake a little bit more when there was a gap. But I'd like to say a really big thank you to him. He really did make me feel welcome and gave me a few tips which I really will learn from in the future. But moving on to the rest of the video, we'll see the next part coming up now. So moving on into the second half of this video, second part of this video, as we are just warming up here. This was actually filmed prior to the GP1 event, and I did this event on just a normal 50 lap race at Teamsport Bristol, just to get a little taste for a race, and rather than just time laps I wanted to just give it a go, as we have some absolutely dramatic warming up of the tyres. I just wanted a little taste of what a race would be like, and just to practice my overtaking a little bit more before I got chucked into the members event, because obviously I knew that the drivers that come for the elite event were very fast and they're also very good, so I didn't want to be completely embarrassed. And this here is footage that actually managed to record itself. But this was footage of me, and here obviously was the warm-up and the practice before we move on into the race. And I really do love the warming up technique that I give myself. But this is the end of the first lap before the lights go green, but I'm not going to show you too much of practice. However, this was my favourite lap. It wasn't necessarily my fastest lap, and I'm not going to put times up or anything for where I was in terms of anything, because they were quite slow laps, to be honest. There was a lot of traffic and it was difficult to get through, but this was my favourite lap of practice, and it's one that I remember very vividly. As you will now see, we come up the ramp, go around the outside of the driver here, and then swoop back to the right and overtake the driver on the left. We then cut in to as close to the apex as we can on both of those corners, and then we try to go around the outside here on the big right hander, which is complete suicide. However, I managed to pull it off by stamping the brakes a little bit and then cutting inside of this person on the left, and that was actually my favourite lap that I thought I'd share with you before we jump into the race. And here you can see we started in second position, which I thought was slightly unfair. I think they probably should have started me in last, but we did get underway here under the green flag, and I got a bit of a jump on the person in first, and I tried to stick as close as I could to the inside to try and cut them off. And here you can see we moved from second to first straight away, and then we were away. And this is the first lap, and you can see here I was just trying to maximise as much time as I could and just sort of pull away from the people behind me. And I didn't want to be stuck with a gaggle of cars and let one person sort of escape, so I sort of took the liberty of that by myself and just sort of ran for the hills really. And that's sort of how the rest of the session ended up, as I just pulled away and carried on throughout my day along the track. But you'll see that there were a lot of fun overtakes, as the transition will suggest, and this was another lap after going round, and we were coming up to our first lapped car of the race, as I really was trying to tuck in as tight as I could. You can see they're all over the place. There was a lot of overtakes like this, and also this. But moving on, we did carry on throughout the session, and this was the first part of the race where I came up to a big group of people rather than just one person, one by one, slowly overtaking them. Here is where there was about 4 drivers ahead of me that I had to get through, and you can see there they were all over the place in terms of exit speed, and I didn't really want to get held up, as there was another driver on track that did have some reasonable pace, and I didn't want to let them catch up to me. I wanted to stay ahead and maintain the gap that I'd made from the first few laps. And here you can see we just dove down the inside there, and they sort of back out of it, and then we move on to the next few cars that are further up the road. And this really was enjoyable for me. I really did enjoy overtaking people, and obviously I tried not to make any contact with people, but there's always contact occasionally. But there you can see, just deliberately slowing right down, and there the person spins out completely, and I believe that led to a yellow flag as we go up the hill. And I just managed to group ahead of that person in the pink suit before the yellow flags were waved. And here I was trying to slow the pack down a little bit behind me, rather than just trying to go around as fast as I could. But straight away the lights turned green, and the person on the right here just waving me through. I believe that is also a member of staff at the track. But here straight away just jumping on the people ahead of us, going too wide down the straight, and I think they backed out on the left as didn't really want to go through there. Here we're all over the place, as I had to really slam the brakes on, and this is where there's a little party going on. As you can see here, there's bumping, there's bashing, there's all sorts. Everyone's all over the place. I couldn't find a way through. I tried going through on the left, I get absolutely squeezed into the wall. Then I tried going up the ramp here, and I'm sort of stuck in the middle. I didn't really know where to go. I was just sort of along for the ride, but luckily the road sort of separated and I bombed through. And then the number 19 car here, I just decided to go right the way around the outside on the top hairpin sections, and managed to just sort of escape that huge pack, which really, I'm surprised there wasn't a big accident there, as there was about 6 or 7 of us in a really small proximity. And there's 3 cars here that sort of escaped just before me, and you can see here they are sliding around, and it was really allowing me to gain a lot of time on the people ahead of me. And they're just going really deep into the corner. It allows me just to cut up the inside and give them a little bit of a switch back. And here we have Also, the Honey Monster was in this race. He was ahead of us here, and he's just sort of going around ahead, but you can see he's also got a bit of a snappy back end, and I was really hoping to capitalise on this as soon as I could and overtake as quickly as I can. As like I said, there was a person behind me that was sort of hunting me down. They sort of move off to the right rather than fighting me, so I did thank them. And here, as I explained before, there was a member of staff on the track that I really did want to try and overtake and beat, and the next few laps is me just trying to close up, trying to catch up and overtake them, rather than cutting and chopping and changing the scenes on the video. But he really was getting some decent lines, and it was helping me to sort of get into my rhythm and get a better flow. And you can see here he is getting held up by the person in front, and you can see how much of a difference that makes. I really have just closed right up behind them, and they go down the inside, and I sort of follow as well, but unfortunately the driver in number 4 just gets a little bit of a better exit than I thought he would, and going quite slow through his bottom section and causing me to go about half throttle. And I didn't know if I should try and overtake on this bottom section, but instead of that I just sort of waited for this hairpin and then up ramp we went with a way better exit. And you can see the difference that being held up behind someone makes. There's a few kart lengths now distance between me and the person ahead, and I really was trying to track them down by being as smooth as possible through the top section rather than stamping on the brakes like all the other drivers on track. And down into the big right hander here, we're just closing up, being as smooth as I could on the pedals. And as we come across the line, I really was trying to gain as much time as I could, especially in this bottom section, as it is my favourite part of the lap. Just going as fast as you can into the first corner and chucking it in, and then just sort of lifting off a little bit and trying to get through the second bit. And there we overtook a very slow car once again, but we were gaining a lot of time on the person ahead of us, and through this section as well, just really shortening the track in comparison to them and getting a way better exit. I say that as I did hit the wall, so maybe not, but here as well, just trying to maintain, as I have said in previous videos, just the same steering angle the whole time. And here I believe he does start to get held up by the person ahead of him, which leads me to really gain a lot of time for the bottom section. And there, I'm not sure if going to the right hand side of the track actually does gain a little bit more traction on the cars. And there the person on the left really trying to get going after hitting the wall, but there finally we managed to dive down the inside and gain the position, which I was really happy about. And here, once more after the restart, we have a few more cars that we were beginning to overtake later on into the session, and I really was enjoying overtaking like a big group and really practicing, trying to find areas of the track where I could gain as much time as I could on people ahead of us. So here I really did almost smash right into the back of number 18 there, but luckily I still managed to get enough speed to just get up the ramp. But they're almost going up the inside, but not enough speed clearly, and trying to take a little bit of a wider line so I get a bit of a better exit on the second hairpin, and it really did work. But I was stuck there number 10, and even though they were slower taking the inside line, so you see the person on the left really going for it and hitting the wall, but sticking to the person on the inside, even if they are the slower car, and allowing your car the space really does help to just push out the people around you. And here I was trying to maintain as tight line as possible while trying not to get distracted by the person weaving around, and they really did close me into the wall here, but luckily I had the tiniest amount of room to work with. And here 3 wide ahead of us, and I was able to lunge it down the inside the bloke in the pink suit, and that allowed me to move up another place. And here once again just trying to go a little bit wider, but that time just to give them a bit more room rather than squeezing people out, as I didn't want to put people in the wall and I didn't want to go too aggressive. And here again just down the inside, gunning it for the start finish line. And here once again this person got really slow, and number 19, not number 12, look pretty similar from that distance, but they're just getting a better exit on that bottom section, looking for the inside but waiting just for them to go a little bit wider than me and compromising on the exit, and that allowed me to get ahead of them. And here another yellow flag and restart and run away and getting a really tight line, and that was a really good exit off the yellow flag, and this allowed me to get a pretty good run up to the hairpin. And I was trying to figure out once again whether flicking into the corner was better, and it really did help for when I got into the GP1 session, as I tried to go on the outside there and it didn't really work. And here the person with the panda hat was, or panda helmet, was the person that was the second fastest driver. However, they did overtake me, although they were actually a lap down, so I thought at this point, I wasn't sure if I had already overtaken them, but then I remembered, so I really did just try to catch up to them and overtake them once more, just to maintain that 1 lap lead, because I didn't really want to be put behind anyone. I was quite upset I got overtaken in this session, to be fair, so I really was looking to maximise all my time, and straight away just going straight down the inside and taking a position back right away and checking to the right to see if they were cutting back and going a little bit more defensive, and that let me stay ahead of that person. Luckily enough for myself, I believe that I completed that overtake as we were coming down here. This was actually the last lap of the race, I believe, so I was able to get ahead, and I really wanted to cement it by overtaking this person as well, and they went quite slow through this bottom section, and really was trying to tag onto the back of them, as I didn't want to get re-overtaken once more by being held up, so I took a nice wide line and I was able to get a nice little bit of a switchback and got the inside at the top of the ramp, and this allowed me then, obviously the inside line, to defend against them and checking back once again to see if they were coming back for an attack, but sticking as tight as I could to these 2 hairpins and coming back down the ramp. Here we can see on the left hand side as we come through the right hand corner, that was the checkered flag, and that was in fact a win for myself, and that was the end. And here as we're cruising around, I'd just like to say thank you very much if you have watched this far into the video. I really do appreciate it, as I really have enjoyed making this video, and once again I am really disappointed that the GP1 session didn't actually film properly, as I wanted to make that into a separate video. However, if you did enjoy the video, please could you leave a like and subscribe for more in the future, as I will have more events coming soon. If you do want to contact me on a more personal level and see the times when I do go down to the track, then feel free to follow me on Instagram, which is linked in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.